Hello, everybody. This is Patrick from the Fringe podcast. Welcome back for episode 12. I think we're on episode 12. I got a very special guest with me today. I'm so thrilled. He's become a great friend to me, and you're going to hear a wild journey of, just the redemption of God, man. It's amazing, and we're so thrilled to have the one, the only, the original Mike Kelly here. What up, man?
What's going on, brother?
How you feeling today?
A little nervous, but
that's all right.
Glad to be here, man. It's an honor.
Definitely. So a lot of times we'll start off the podcast with an icebreaker. Shout out to the homie who made this game. How deep will you go? I love it. It's a great game for conversation starters. We've used this in the church, so we're going to start off light today. And the question for you is, what's a place you need to travel before you die?
Oh man, honestly, I want to see Mount Rushmore. It's one of the few places I haven't been.
That's an interesting take. Why? Why that?
I'm patriotic. I love my country, and that's a big symbolism for our country. It's, some of the greatest presidents we've had.
For sure. It's amazing if you think about the sheer architectural skill, right? Hey, I mean, it's amazing what you could do before the internet, right? Can you imagine people doing that with smartphones? There's no way, bro.
Man,
hey, we're bored. Let's go spend 1,000 days carving into the side of this. It's granite, isn't it?
Yeah.
And to do it on that scale and that size, and you get the face right.
And the communication, how did they communicate back and forth? No, his nose is a little too big.
Right. That's what I'm saying. Now, and I shout out to all my artist friends. I know some dope artist friends. Shout out to David Jonathan, who just tagged up the church. We got this amazing floral scene. It's beautiful, man. He put this backdrop on the stage on the church, and he just got his phone out and looked at it and freehanded it with spray paint. That's amazing to me. Man,
it's amazing. I love it. That was one of the first things that really made the church, it drove it home that this is real. This is happening.
Yeah. For sure. But a lot of artists, they'll use a projector, and I don't think it's cheating. I think it just cuts down on time. I know artists that can freehand, but they'll use a projector.
Right.
But you think about using the surface of stone, right? You're not drawing, you're not painting, and you're up there chiseling. It's amazing, man. It's amazing what you can do when you stop scrolling your phone, homies.
Man.
Put the phone down. I got this thing not long ago. I ordered it on the internet because I'll be honest, I've wasted a lot of time doom scrolling, and I want to get out of that. There's things that I want to do. There's things I want to create that I'm not doing because I waste. And then you'll say, well, I just don't have time.
Man.
Yes, you do. Hey, shout out. This is a word of the Lord for somebody listening. You got time. You just got to put your thumbs down.
Put your thumbs down, man.
But I found this device on the internet. It's called the Brick, and it's this little thing that it's some type of app, and it's a magnetic little square, and you put it up in your house, you link your phone to it, and you just tap your phone to it, and what it does is it disables all your social media for a certain amount of time. So if you're man, I want to lock in, you know what I mean? Boom, hit the Brick. This is not a sponsorship for Brick, by the way. They did not pay me for this advertisement. Hey, we're all about getting this thing monetized so we could eat, you know what I mean? Brick, hey, if you want to shoot me some royalties and residuals, I'll take them. But no, I think it's a great idea.
It really is. I mean, honestly, social media in general has caused a lot of commotion in our lives. It's more negative than positive.
For sure.
At the same time, there are the upsides to it.
Mm-hmm.
Social media is getting this podcast out there and getting the word from our church out there, and
for sure,
really everything.
Absolutely. Yeah, I don't think it's, I tell people all the time, some people who are older and they're just grumpy, oh, the internet's evil, the cheat television. I remember when people were calling the TV the one-eyed devil with his tail plugged into the wall. It's nah, homie, it's what channel are you watching, and you got control of that remote, and for people that are listening, that your whole feed and your whole timeline is trash and negativity. Let me tell you something. The algorithm feeds you what you're looking for.
Man.
So it's all how you use it. You know what I mean?
It really is.
But it is kind of creepy because, there's a microphone feature on our phones, and if it's not turned off, Like, it'll hear you. I thought this was like some conspiracy theory, you know what I mean? And then someone's like, look, let's just try it. You know, we'll try talking about a vacuum, you know? And sure enough, like, I log into my socials and there's these advertisements for that vacuum. It's so bizarre. It makes you wonder, like, in the next 10 years, you know, what's the situation going to be?
Man, do you remember the show Futurama?
I do.
You remember the episode where they came out with the iPhone, where they implanted it in their eye?
And was it literally an iPhone?
It
That's
was
hilarious.
literally an iPhone. Like I
don't think I saw that. Yeah,
oh, man.
It's funny. It makes you wonder, like, in 10 years, if they're just going to plug it into the back of your head, you know? It's just so bizarre.
I mean, they already got I think it's Amazon. It's got the Echo glasses.
Yeah.
Ray-Ban's got the
Ray-Ban's
smart
got 'em too,
glasses. Like, it'll search anything you look at and tell it to search.
Part of it is amazing. It's phenomenal that we have the ability to create that stuff. And I'm fascinated by technology. I think technology, again, it's a tool. It's all how you use it, and you could use that to do some beautiful stuff or some really dark, nefarious stuff. So it's all how you use it, man. So let's just start off with, man, you know, maybe we can talk about, we'll start off with, you know, where are you from? And then if you want to jump in before we get into the complexity of your story, you know, how did we meet? So if you want to speak to some of that, where are you from?
Well, originally, I was born right here in Hamilton, at Fort Hamilton. All my family's from out in Ross and Okeana, and my mom lives here in Fairfield. I mean, my family's really from a little bit of everywhere. I lived in Pennsylvania for a few years as a kid, but this right here, Butler County, is my stomping grounds. Like, this is home.
For sure, for sure. Do you think people have an accent down here compared to up north?
Little bit. Now, I lived in Oklahoma for almost a year.
I'm talking Ohio, bro. Like,
Ohio. Oh, yeah.
From Cleveland to here.
Little bit. The terminology.
Because I hear it. I hear it.
It definitely is.
I remember teasing my sons, you know, when I first met Sarah. She had the 3 boys already. And the way they would say closet, they would say closet. It's just funny. There's like a little southern, like, country drawl. Like, it's so slight, though. You know what I mean? It's not like Mississippi, like, how are yins doing, or y'all, you know? But it's slight. It's like the Ohio southern accent. I love it.
Oh, yeah. It's like, well, when I would go to Ross, like when I went to Ross schools and came back here to Hamilton for a little bit, like, I picked up the little country drawl from Ross.
Just from that, yeah.
And then I get back to Hamilton, they're like, what in the world? Where is this country bumpkin from?
That's funny. So, you know, Hamilton, for those of you listening that are not from Ohio, you're not from the United States, Hamilton is a city that is in between Cincinnati and Dayton in Ohio. So we're like located smack dab in the middle. If you're driving south from Cleveland, you pass Dayton. We're like in between Dayton and Cincinnati. So yeah, man, why don't you speak to how we met, and then we'll get into, you know, kind of our situation and, you know, what God's doing in your life. But
well, we actually met through one of my housemates. I'm in a sober living, and he was like, man, if you really need a job, apply on, you know, the Fringe industries. And matter of fact, just come to church with me Sunday and let me introduce you to, you know, Patrick. And I think that's the first time we met and actually talked. And then right after that, we did our person-to-person interview.
That's right. Yep.
And that's where we really connected and started talking. And from there, it went from, you know, that interview to I went working with you personally with your, you know, with the remodeling and everything. And man, our friendship just kind of blew up from there, man. Yeah. Like, and just our conversations with, you know, about the Bible and spirituality and everything, you know, it opened my eyes up. And
for sure. We'll get to that. Don't go there yet. So let me ask you this. For anybody listening, you said you're in sober living. Why don't you explain to people who are not familiar with what sober living is? Like, what is that?
Okay, so sober living, so it's a place where anybody that's sober coming out of rehab, you could be coming from the streets, you didn't need rehab, but it's a chance for you to get back on your feet, be around more like-minded people. My sober living's a little different. You know, we have a little more freedom. You know, yeah, it's a little more expensive than most, but, you know, we have to have a job. You know, we have chores. Each one of us have a chore in the house. In my house, I'm what you call the coordinator, which I'm in charge of handing out the chores, making sure they're getting done, making sure rooms are clean.
So you're like the mother.
I really am. Like,
do you carry around a belt or a paddle?
I mean, I always have my belt on. They really get scared when the wallet chain comes out.
Yeah.
They start running.
That's funny.
But I mean,
it's important though, isn't it? Right. So, and those of you listening, most of you, you've heard some of my story. Like when you come out of that stuff, right? You come out of addiction. We'll get to all that. You've lost everything. For a lot of people, they burn their bridges. They have no house to go live in. They've never, for a lot of them, they haven't lived sober for a very long time. And so like, this is your first experience out of treatment to like, okay, what does it look like to live a sober life?
At first, it was scary. Like, I didn't know how to cope with everyday things sober, because before getting clean, my go-to for everything, I'm happy, I'm getting high.
Yeah.
I'm upset, I'm getting high.
So you didn't need a reason.
I didn't need a reason. Like, I wanted to numb myself.
Sure.
And now, as I got sober, at first, it was scary. It was like, wait, what are these emotions? What do you mean?
What is this moisture coming out of the corner of my eye?
And I've had plenty of them
funny.
moments, and I was one of the ones I decided on my own, like, enough was enough.
Yeah.
I had my first, before really knowing much about the Bible, I had my first, moment of, my God, why have you forsaken me?
Yeah.
And it was a dark moment. And not even 2 days later, I took myself to rehab. Enough was enough.
Yeah.
And I knew nothing was going to change unless I changed it.
For sure. That was one of the reasons why we brought you into the program. We're always looking for, hey man, when is this guy, when is this woman, when is this young guy, young woman, when are they tired? And I found it's not the case with everybody, but usually when somebody takes it upon themselves, like, no, I need some help, and I'm not going to be court ordered. You know what I'm saying? I don't need to get arrested. I don't have to overdose, and maybe you did. I don't know. We'll get to that in a minute, but I'm going to make a choice right now. It's going to be hard. I know it's going to be misery, but man. I am making the choice to go in myself, unprovoked or unmanipulated.
Right.
And I think that says a lot about, where you were at, that you really were tired.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I had lost everything. I'd lost my family. I'd lost my home, and I was tired of just being depressed all the time. Like, I hated life. I hated myself more than anything, and I knew for something to change, like, I had to make that choice.
For sure.
And actually, the day that I went in to rehab, like, that morning I went to a very close brother's house, and I said, man, I'm going to rehab. I'm doing it. Like, don't let me talk myself out of it. I got to. I have to.
Yeah.
And, he didn't let me leave his side that day until it was early enough for me to take myself.
That's a good friend.
And, it's actually, I went to a rehab that my father had recommended, and my dad, he kind of gave me the wrong location, because I walked into this rehab, their intake building, and I'm like, I need to get help. I need to go to rehab. And they looked at me and said, well, do you have a recommendation? I said, my father. And they're like, no, you need a court recommendation or something. I'm like, well, this is where I was told to go, and they turned me away.
Huh.
But that didn't stop me. Like,
wow, that's crazy though.
Yeah.
You think they would have been like, hey man, there's this place, and that place. Because that little push away is enough to send somebody back out.
But I was so determined to get my life back.
Yeah.
That I called my aunt, which is the one that actually took my dad to rehab when he went.
Sure.
And she's like, well, hold on, I'll come pick you up, and I'll take you to the right one.
For sure.
And I'm not going to lie, I was sitting there waiting on her, like, debating, do I just
I want to do this? Yeah.
Do I really want to do this? Do I really want to do this? And I called my brother that sat with me all that morning, and didn't let me talk myself out. He's like, no, Mike, you're doing this. You're doing this.
Love it.
He's like, come on, brother.
I love it.
It was scary. I'm not going to lie. Like, I'm sitting at, the intake building, doing all this and going through everything. And I actually ran into a friend of my cousin's, which goes to our church, and she actually goes to our church, and she sat down next to me, and she's like, I know your cousin. And I remember looking at her and going, I'm sorry.
That's funny.
And, she she helped talk me through it and told
That's
me,
good.
you know, how good, you know, how this is probably the best choice I've made.
Yeah, man.
And, you know, I'm glad if she wouldn't have sat down, I might have walked out of that intake building.
For sure.
You know, it's a scary thing.
I think that's the critical part that I've learned with trying to help people who are coming out of that stuff. Like if you're listening to this podcast, you're a parent, you're a brother, a sister, a husband, a wife, maybe it's your mom or your dad that's battling addiction, and you know you're asking yourself, well, what more can I do? We just want to tell you, man, that until somebody gets tired, there's nothing you can do. Unfortunately, that's just the raw dog truth. Like it's there's nothing you can do. I mean, there is something you can do, and it's called pray, and there's power in prayer, and I don't want to minimize the gravity of that, but you have to let. The worst thing you could do is insulate somebody from the consequences of their choices and to make their addiction comfortable. And that's a hard thing to do, man, when it's somebody that you love. But the key is, you know, as Mike is talking about his story, when he was ready to make that decision, man, he had this posse around him that were willing to help him work through those steps. You know, okay, we got to the wrong place. Man, the moment that loved one is serious, like, homie, you better drop everything, cancel your day at work, call off school, and do whatever it takes to get them in once they're tired. But if you try to strive with them before that moment, you know, they're not. Yeah, they're not gonna make it.
Well, it kind of goes back to that old saying that it was burned into my brain at an early age. You can lead a horse to water, but you can't force it to drink.
For sure.
You know, and in this case, unless they're really that desperate to get clean, to want to do the right thing, there's nothing you can do or say, because either A, they're going to lie to you.
Yeah.
You know, they're going to make you believe otherwise.
For sure.
Or they're just going to cut you out of their life completely. You know, and sadly, I did that to a lot of people in my life. Like, I cut them out. Like, no, you're not going to tell me what I need to do.
Yeah.
You know, I'm my own person. I'm going to do what I want.
For sure.
And, you know, I mean, I was homeless. I was living in a tent, you know.
Speaking of that, that's what I was going to ask you next is, like, you know, what was your drug of choice? What was some of the lowest stuff you experienced when you were out there? And, like, what was going through your mind as you were out there? Does that make sense?
So my drug of choice was meth. Like, that was, you know, I felt like I didn't have enough time in a day that if I did go to sleep, I'd get done what I wanted to do. And the reality of it was a completely different picture. But, I mean, the lowest thing was I really put, you know, I came to terms with the fact that I loved that drug. I still do. Like,
That's
I
real.
fight with that every day.
Keep it real, yeah.
You know, and, you know, I put that drug before everything, before myself. There were days where it came between buying a little bit or eating, and I chose to buy a little bit. Sure. I mean, man, when I went to rehab, I was 109 pounds. You know, I was in the running for Skeletor's twin. You know?
Well, I think that's a part that a lot of people don't understand who have never used, is they see people making these extreme choices, and like logically it doesn't make sense. Like, bro, you have nowhere to sleep. It's freezing outside. You're living, you know, I posted something on the internet today about there being 27 homeless encampments in our county alone. A lot of it is for a lot of different reasons, you know, everything from, you know, PTSD and veterans to mental illness. And then obviously, of course, addiction. You have a lot of people out there from addiction, and a logical person who is not using drugs and in active addiction, or that's never used that, they look at somebody who's doing that and they're like, well, why don't you want to sleep in a warm bed, and don't you want to eat? I know you're hungry, but why don't you speak to the fact, and we don't need to spend a ton of time on this because there's more to your story, and I know you know this, but I want to remind you, there's more to your story and who you are as a person than just your history of that.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I mean? But why don't you speak to just that very briefly about how logic, when you start using those type of drugs, logic is just gone, bro.
Your logic disappears before you even realize it. You know, at first, you know, you feel like you're in control. Like, well, I'm just going to wake up and do a little bit, just do a little line, and I'll be good all day. But then you slowly build a tolerance, just like you build a tolerance to everything. You know, even things like caffeine and you know, you build a tolerance to it, and at some point, you're, you know, you do that little bit,
Right.
and then an hour later you're ready to fall asleep, or you are falling asleep, you know, and you got to do a little bit more, and then that eventually your whole life becomes, you know, engulfed with just that.
Yeah.
And you know, like how people are like, you know, well, I know you're hungry. Why don't you know? Do you want something? At a certain point, you know, it's kind of like a rabbit hole, like it, you know, because you're depressed now because you've lost everything.
Right.
So in my case, I would get high, and then now I'm depressed because I just got high,
It's a
so I get
vicious
high
circle.
again.
Yeah.
And you would constantly beat yourself down until you felt like there's nothing left, and that is your only thing in this life that you wanted, was to just get high.
Yeah.
And I hit that point, and I even hit, you know, the lowest point of it. You know, it took a lot for me to just say, I got to do this. Enough is enough.
Yeah.
Like, you know,
I heard somebody say one time, speaking about sin and how sin will deceive you.
Oh yeah.
And sin is anything. It's not just, you know, you're out using drugs. It's all the ways in which all of us, every single one of you listening, we all have ways of darkness and things that we participate in that we know that they're not good. And they were speaking about sin, and they said sin will always take you further than you wanted to go, keep you longer than you wanted to stay, and cost you more than you wanted to spend.
Oh yeah.
Right. And it's that verse. It reminds me of that verse that when it talks about Jesus and salvation, the wages of sin is death, homie. It's death.
Man.
But the death doesn't all come at once, does it?
No.
It creeps up, because if it came at once and someone's like, hey, I got this thing I want you to take, and man, I want you to know that as soon as you take this, like today, you're going to lose your kids. You're not going to have anywhere to live. You know what I'm saying? And that's the same way with other stuff. Like
it really is.
Sin it's sneaky, it's slick, it creeps in, and but death is coming, homie. And there's this other verse that it talks about how sin is it's fun for a season, but there's going to come an end to that season, right?
Eventually, yes.
And eventually, that death is going to start creeping up. And I'm just thankful to God, bro, that you're still alive, that you're here. And like you serve, because you and I both know a lot of people that didn't make it.
Oh yeah.
And so, you know, why don't you speak about? And there's so much we could get into your story. You know, you were part of a club. You were a biker. You know, you experienced that stuff. You know, you've had a lot of different experiences in life. You know what? Why don't you speak to, and you can share anything that you want to say, but I'll ask you another question after that. You know, as you walk through life and as you're connecting with these different groups and you're experiencing life, like, was there a part of you even back then that was longing for something more?
Oh yeah, there definitely was. Even at some point, I even questioned if that's who I really was. Like, was I Mike?
Yeah.
Or was I that biker Mike, that, you know, that image that I created to hide who I really was? You know, there was points where it was like, who am I really?
Which one am I? Yeah.
And it's kind of funny because there for the longest time, man, I wouldn't even look myself in the mirror because I didn't even know if that's who I was looking at, you know. And there were things that I've done. It's like I was ashamed of what I've done. You know, it's like,
what have I become?
Right. You know, I've hurt people that I never even met, you know, just because, hey, look, he did this, you know, I can't obviously handle it because I'll be connected, you know, and I'm one of them people. I've always hated hurting people, you know, and every time I've had, even growing up, when I've had to fight somebody, you know, I think I felt worse about it than they did about getting beat up.
Yeah,
you know, it was like,
you still had a conscience back then.
Yeah. And even through addiction, I had a conscience.
For sure.
But that little demon, you know, was just talk to me for a minute and you'll forget about it.
Yeah.
And I did for a minute, but eventually it would come back, you know, and it would just slowly destroy me. And, you know, I slowly became something that I tried so hard not to become.
Yeah.
And I mean, honestly, right now, sitting here today, I can honestly say I know who I am again, I love myself again.
Come on, man.
And, you know, I'm a completely different person than I was then, you know, because I actually am compassionate about things. Like, I find joy in life again, you know. I found little, you know, I'm still discovering a lot about myself.
For sure.
But I discovered enough that I'm able to actually, I've come into had contact with people. It's like, here, man, you want to go get hot? I'm good, man.
Yeah,
you know, I'm done with that. That's not who I am anymore.
For sure.
And yeah,
that's powerful, bro. Because I think when we realize who we are, even if we don't understand the totality of that, when we have some sense of identity, like when those opportunities of temptation do come, because they're never going to they're never going to stop.
Oh, no.
You know, regardless of what your vice is. So before you judge somebody with addiction, those of you listening, we all got our vices. Those temptations are always going to come. And the power is not in just trying to muster up strength. The power is in realizing who we are in Christ, right? And who our identity is. And when we have, even if we have just a glimpse of it, and you've heard me share the story, but I remember after I got out of prison, you know, I was following Jesus. I was trying to live the right way. You know what I mean? I used to do home invasions and sell drugs and all this other stupid stuff. And, you know, was a womanizer, and I had no idea what it meant to be a healthy man, you know,
right.
Or to work a job, or just any of that stuff, and have people mouth off and not get in trouble or not smack them, you know? And I remember, like, I just got pushed to the point. I was going through this relational issue, and then this guy that lived next to me was starting all this trouble and this drama for no reason, and trying to posture and threaten, you know what I mean? I've always hated bullies, you know? And so, like, I was just struggling, bro. I was struggling. Man. And I was ready to give up. I go to the corner store, you know what I mean? And mind you, up until that point, I was stone sober. I hadn't touched anything. I had been out for about 2 years. And I go to the corner store in the hood in Cleveland, and I'm like, I go get my 8-ball, my 40 OE, you know what I mean? I'm in the line. No, I probably would have went into a coma because I hadn't had that for so long, you know.
Man.
But I'm in line, and I had this friendship and this relationship. Shout out to Pastor Phil Greenaway. Phil Greenaway, I love you, brother. I had this relationship with the pastor of the church that I went to. We were tight, man. He was a good dude. He was real. He was honest. There was none of that fake, phony stuff with him. And I called him up because he had been really good to me, you know. And I'm like, hey, Phil, I just want to thank you for everything you've done for me. And I appreciate you've been good to me. You never judged me when I came to the church despite my history. And I said, but I just want to let you know I can't do this anymore. I'm in line. I got this 40. I'm going to buy it and I'm going to drink it. And that's how safe I felt in that friendship. You know what I mean?
Right.
And I said, hey, I'm going to buy this 40. I'm going to drink it. And then I'm going to go smack my neighbor with it. You know? And I said, but I want you to know before I do that like, I appreciate you, bro. You tried. And I thank you for trying. And I meant it. I wasn't trying to be shock value or be some thug. Like I was really at a low point. I was broken when I was telling him it. And he said something beautiful to me, bro. He's like, hey, Patrick, I want you to know that even if you do that, Jesus still loves you.
Man.
But it's what he said to me next. But that's not who you are anymore. That's not who you are anymore. That's who you were. That's not who you are anymore.
Right.
And it was like a switch was flipped. And suddenly, man, the power, dude, I felt the power of God in that grocery store or in that hood store holding that 40. I'm like, oh, hold up. This is not this doesn't own me anymore. You know what I'm saying? And that wasn't my strength, but it was another brother reminding me, hey, homie, that's not who you are.
Man.
And I think identity, and when we realize, hey, that's not who I am, it's powerful. It's powerful. You and I were talking about something, and this won't be the only episode you're on. There's so much we could get into, bro. I'm trying to keep it in a reasonable length, but we were talking about something one day driving to work about bike culture, and, you know, I grew up around the Hells Angels. I know some of the horsemen around here, and we've talked often about how people in certain groups, society, especially people in churches, they look at these groups of people, and they automatically assume that they're bad, that they're unfriendly, that they're dangerous. And don't get me wrong, there's people that are in those groups, right?
There definitely are.
But some of the most kind people, some of the most generous people, some of the most selfless people I've met have been people that were involved in gangs and, like, you know, homeless people. I remember seeing the generosity of homeless people when I would go into the encampments,
Man.
and how I would give this dude a sleeping bag. And even though he didn't have one, like he would go find that girl who's pregnant and give her the bag. You know what I'm saying? And so why don't you speak to that? And we'll get to the church stuff because this is a good segue. But why don't you speak to bike culture? And I'm not saying it's all good, right?
Oh, it's not all
But
good.
why don't you speak to, like, there is a sense of community.
Oh, there is.
And walking through life together, which Jesus has called us to do, that they get and they do beautifully. Why don't you speak to some of that?
So, like, for me, bike culture, it's a brotherhood. Like, it really is. Like, it don't matter where you're at, what you're doing, you can call. And it don't matter if they're 3 hours away. They will drop everything and come help you. And some of the most kind-hearted, most generous people that I've ever met in my life rode motorcycles, had tattoos, had been in prison, and I believe it's because they know what it's like to be, to struggle. They know what it's like to feel alone, and, just a club in general, like, a lot of these clubs have a bad image, but at the same time, do they really see some of the good things that these clubs do? Like, there's a club in particular down in, Kentucky. They do, like, charity drives for kids. We actually, I'm pretty sure they're nationwide, but there's a club out there called Crusaders for Children that all they do is, they're against child abuse. Like, I don't know how well they're set in here, but I know, like, over in Indiana and that, if there's a case where a child's been abused,
right,
like, really badly, and the mother is afraid.
They'll go to court with them and everything. It's amazing, bro. I've seen that.
They will set, brothers out
I've
both
seen
doors.
I've seen that
24/7. They will escort the kid to school, and then when it comes time to testify, they're right there.
They're right there, so they feel
right
safe.
There.
Hey, real quick, shout out to all the bikers listening, man. I know some of you guys listen. Hey, whether you realize it or not, homie, you're doing God's work, man. That's beautiful. I'm not saying all of it, but that kind of stuff right there, bro, that's beautiful. It's amazing, and it's interesting to me because it reminds me. That's what I was trying to look up. I wasn't texting. I was trying to look up in the book of Acts chapter 2, and it speaks of this all throughout the book of Acts about how the early church. How when somebody broke down, they were there for each other.
Oh yeah.
When somebody went without, they would sell something to help that person out. And so I find it very, very concerning that bike clubs, gang members know how to do Acts 2 better than the church.
It is. It's kind of.
And I'm gonna say it. Like, I'm gonna say that, and I'll probably catch some flack for that. And I'm not saying all churches, but, like, hey, there is a sense of community and a sense of, like, I got you back. I got your back, bro. And, like, if you're hungry, I'm going to feed you. Like, if you ain't got a ride, if your vehicle breaks down, like, there's a sense of we're in this together.
Oh, yeah. It's, a lot of clubs, like, they spend weekends together. They celebrate holidays together.
Yeah.
Whenever another member in the club, is having a kid, they're there.
They're there. Yeah.
They celebrate birthdays together. It's outside
it's
of
not
your,
just self-serving.
Right. Yeah, outside of your little, your old lady, your kids, those brothers are your they're your family as well. And they're going to go to whatever length they can, not just for you.
But for your whole family.
And it's 9 times out of 10, if a biker, a club or anything is coming at you aggressive, you have really had to have done something.
Yeah.
Because, I know a lot of bikers, all over the U.S., all over around here. And I'm telling you, it don't matter where you're from, what walk of life you're from. If they're riding by and they see you struggling, they're going to stop.
100%.
And, that's because of that, that family, that brotherhood, that love. And, we actually have a couple different, like, Christian biker groups around here. Like,
shout out to the Fringe Riders.
Oh, yeah. Jerry, love you, man.
Yeah.
we also have the Bikers for Christ.
Yep.
You know, one of my housemates, his dad rides with the Bikers for Christ. We also have the Brothers in Christ around the area, and I'm not sure.
I think I have heard about those guys.
Yeah, I think they're
Is
more.
that New Miami?
Yeah, New Miami.
Yeah.
You know, there's a lot of them out there, and there's actually the church my grandfather used to go to before he moved to Virginia is out there on Lehigh out in Ross by. Oh, what is that? It's a little, I forget the name of the little neighborhood, but I mean, it's out in Ross. I mean, there's many little neighborhoods as you're driving through the country.
For sure.
But, you know, and the preacher there, you know, he's tatted up.
Yeah.
He never would have.
God's moving in all them communities. You know, shout out, and I won't say his name because he wouldn't want me to. Not because he's concerned, but because he did it with no strings attached. But, you know, when we were opening the coffee shop that was going to employ people coming out of prison, employ people coming out of addiction, you know, we got this old building and we had to rehab it. And, you know, we had no money to do it. And so it was all volunteer based. And, I had a major guy from a local, you know, a one percenter club reach out to me and say, hey, man, like, I believe in what you're doing, bro. What can I do to help? He's a carpenter. Him and his fiance, I think they're married now. Shout out to them, too. You know who you are. We love you guys. We appreciate you. You know, they came and they served selflessly. He knew I was a pastor. He knew we ran a church. And, like, and he loved what we did and he believes in second chances. And, you know, he's been sober now. I think he just celebrated 8 years. Good dude, man. Was out there on his hands and knees putting in baseboard and fixing this and fixing that. And meanwhile, I'm begging church people to, like, come out and help these people. And like, there's nothing but dial tone. You know what I mean? And I'm not saying there wasn't some, because there were some amazing people from different churches that helped us. But, man, it didn't measure up with the amount of churches that are around here. You know what I mean? And so that's a perfect example. Like, you know, it talks about in the Bible that be careful how you treat people, because some of you have encountered angels unaware.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And I wonder, you know, and I'm not saying that necessarily this guy, but, you know, could God appear as a one percenter or as a gang member or as somebody who's homeless or as a woman on the street? Could that be an angel in disguise? And we're judging them at a distance, but God, you know what I'm saying? Right. I wonder on that day, man, when we stand before him, you know?
I've actually wondered that same thing. You know, in my eyes, if he was to come back as somebody, I would see him coming back as a one percenter.
Yeah.
Or, you know, someone that you just wouldn't really expect, because he would want to see
how you going to treat him.
How people are going to treat him.
Yeah, man.
You know, when they think he's something that he's not.
Well, and that's who he hung out with. You know, the first century outcasts were the people Jesus was hanging out with. He was hanging out with the tax collector. Like that was one of the most hated people in society. The prostitutes, you know what I mean? The people that were that he was known for being a friend of sinners.
Yeah.
And I always share this that scripture, because he wasn't known as somebody that went and talked to them for 5 minutes. He was known as their friend.
Right.
Which means he hung out with them more than once.
Oh, yeah.
And I think, where do we get this idea in the American church that we're supposed to live in this isolated bubble and just hide in these church buildings? And, like, when Jesus' whole ministry was like going out and sharing meals and connecting with people. And yeah, he wasn't, one thing I love about the Lord, he wasn't ashamed to be seen with them.
Right.
He wasn't embarrassed. He knew what them religious people were going to say about him, that they were going to call him a drunkard and a you know, a wine bibber, and, you know, you're a friend of sinners. And, you know, he knew all that stuff was going to be said about him, but he didn't care. He cared. Listen, this is powerful. If you're a leader in ministry, Jesus cared more about them than he cared about his reputation. And we got to stop caring what people think about us if it's hindering us from loving people who are going to bring judgment or some type of gossip about us. He loved them more than he loved his reputation. And that's the Son of God, homie. That's God himself in flesh. If he didn't care about his reputation and what people thought about him, then, man, we shouldn't.
Honestly, I think that's the problem with society. We are too concerned with what everyone else is going to think about what we're doing, when the reality is the only person that really needs to be concerned with what we're doing is ourselves.
Facts.
You know, it's at the end of the day, it's not them that have to go to bed with what you've done.
Right.
You know, it's not them that has to look in the mirror and look in the eyes of somebody that, you know, and that's somewhere where I've gotten in my life where at one point it mattered to me what everybody thought.
Right.
You know?
Yeah, everybody's battled that.
And, you know, at this point, it don't matter who thinks what of me, because as long as I know I've done my best that day and I did my best to treat everybody the way I wanted to be treated.
For sure.
You know, I sleep easy.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I try not to judge anybody anymore. You know, I never really did, but I still try not to just look at somebody and go, well.
Well, think about the people, and this is where it makes sense. Think about the people that you thought you would have nothing in common with. People throughout your life, and we all have them. If you really stop and you think about your own life, we all have people we thought we would never be friends with, or I would never have any commonality, or that wouldn't be interesting talking to that person. And then you, for whatever reason, you get put in a situation where you have to talk, and you're like, man, you're actually very interesting to me. And we got a lot in common, even though we're from completely polar opposites of the world, you know?
I'm kind of sitting across from one, you know, it's kind of funny, you know, if you would have asked me about a year ago, if you would have told me a year ago that one of my closest friends, someone I looked up to, was going to be a preacher, you know, I would have laughed at you. I might have smacked you, quit telling jokes.
Same.
But, you know, nowadays, almost everybody I surround myself with, not all of them go to church.
Sure.
You know, but almost everybody I surround myself with anymore are people I would never have thought in a million years that I would have befriended. You know, that I would have looked up to or taken their words of advice, you know, as deeply as I do. Like I don't know if you remember, I think it was a couple months ago, you know, in my sober living house, I woke up, went to go to the bathroom, and I found my drug of choice sitting on the counter.
Yeah.
And you were one of the first people I messaged. You know, you and my cousin Stacy, you know, God love her.
Yeah.
You know, she's never given up on me. She's always been right there. And
shout out to Stacy.
Oh, definitely.
She's amazing.
She definitely is, you know, and she dropped everything. I'm pretty sure she called me. She said, "Are you okay?"
Yeah.
I'm okay. Yeah, it's difficult. I got the shakes.
Sure.
You know, my housemate, the one that brought me to church, you know, he checked on me repeatedly that day.
Good.
He's like, "Brother, you okay?" Man, thank you. I appreciate.
Definitely.
Thank you.
Definitely.
You know, and actually, it was funny when you were talking about being in the store with the 40 ounce. You know, I'm pretty sure you said some along them lines to me, like, that's not you anymore. That has no power over you anymore.
That is what I said. Because I remember being in that space, bro, and like you got that trigger the size of a building right in front of you.
Man.
And like everything is your flesh, right? And that's the war between flesh and spirit. Your flesh, that old version of you is still there.
Oh, yeah.
But that's not who you are, because scripturally, when you come to Jesus, you're inwardly being renewed day by day, right? And you're born again, and that's not who you are. That's who your flesh is. You know what I mean? And I think that's part of the problem why people fall and people fall away from the Lord, is they forget, man. Like, hey, that's still in there, homie.
Oh, yeah.
And if you ain't honest about it, and you're not vulnerable about it, say, look, man, I'm in this situation, and I really want to do this, without all that weird religious soft language around it. You know what I mean?
It really is. And, you know, honestly, if I wouldn't have utilized my sober support network, you know, like, and it grows every day.
Yeah,
you know, every day there's somebody new that I know that if I'm struggling, you know, now I got my main go-tos, you know, I've got you know, my cousin Stacy, you know, man, Jerry, you know, there's just so many people. But what people don't understand, especially in recovery early on, that you can't be afraid to utilize that.
Right,
Don't be afraid to say,
yeah, man,
look, I need you. I'm struggling, you know.
Yeah.
And that's why a lot of times a relapse happens. You know,
You're trying to do it on your own.
Right.
Yeah.
And
None of us are that strong.
no. And, I honestly got to say, since, finding my newfound faith in Jesus and in God, and, it's gotten easier.
Yeah.
Now, it's not always easy, but it's gotten easier, and the temptation is less.
Mm-hmm.
And I've learned to go ahead and, put my pride aside. That's the biggest thing.
Oh,
pride
that's it right
is
there.
the biggest thing. It's you got to learn to set it aside, and say, I need help.
The ego will kill you.
Oh, it will. Like,
yeah, I was preaching about that this past Sunday. Is ego and the pride. That is, I mean, there's so many Bible verses how pride comes before a fall, and it doesn't matter what your vice is, and everybody has one. I think the pride and the arrogance and the unwillingness to be vulnerable, and that's one thing that I hate about the American church right now. In a lot of churches, is they have the complete inability to be vulnerable and honest about their struggles, And I think, like, hey man, if you're on staff at a church and you're listening to this and your job is like the community pastor or to create community and connection in your church, I think some of the training shouldn't be just going to Bible college. I think you should go have to sit in an NA or an AA meeting for about 3 months and just sit back and watch how these people treat each other, bro. You walk in the door, you could have came in high, you could have came in drunk, you might smell, you could be sober for 20 years. And man, as you come in, you're getting hugged, people are asking how you're doing, they're friendly, they're welcoming, they're encouraging. You could share your darkest, darkest story in that circle, and there's safety. Like, how have we lost that in the church, man? And I believe part of our calling, right, with our church is to reclaim that stuff.
Oh yeah.
And I think that when I think about the power, there's so much power to meetings, but that's one of the things I just love to just sit back and watch.
Oh yeah, there's so much love in that room, and it's everybody in that room, because they've been where you're at.
Yeah.
They've already gone where you just came from, and there's nothing you can tell them.
Yeah.
That's going to shock them, that they're not going to know
how
to
there's
react.
no shock value.
And, I regularly attend NA. I love the meetings. I love the people there. I've met so many good people. And, man, there's just no other feeling like it. And honestly, that same feeling I have going into an NA meeting is the same feeling I had that first time I walked into your church.
Interesting. And speaking of that, let's go there, because that's a good segue. Let me say, as the pastor, one of the founding pastors, me and my wife of the church, we're coming up on 8 years, I think, 7 or 8 years. Is it 7 or 8? I don't know, man. It's been a wild ride. It's one of the two. We're still here. We still love each other. My wife and I, we have some sanity left, but hey, we're not a perfect church by any stretch. And so I'm not asking you this, just lather the praise on me or the church. It's all about Jesus, man. But I love hearing from the perspective of an outsider that had not been in church for a long time or had never really connected for whatever reason. What was that like walking in, and what has it meant to you? What has it done for you?
Man, I can't even put into words, what it's done for me, what it means to me. But, walking in there, I think the biggest thing was when James introduced me to you. It was, you took the time to talk to me a little bit, before and after, and everybody in there, your brother Lee, shout out to him. I've gotten to know him a little bit better, and I love the guy.
Yeah,
he's talking to him, and just everybody was so welcoming compared to previous churches I've been to, where the moment I walk in, like, I get looked at like I don't belong. Who is this outsider? Like, I've got the plague or something. But when I walked into your church for the first time, it was like open arms, like people I didn't even know were hugging me, telling me welcome, and it felt like home. Like, I felt like I had
It's powerful.
a family that I had lost. Like, I've
Yeah,
found
that's
a new
powerful.
family. And
It's beautiful, man.
man, any chance I get, anybody I see, like a good friend of mine, William Disney. I love the guy. I've known him since, man, I've lost count. I don't know if it's a curse or a blessing, but I love the guy. He comes to church whenever he's got a day off, and there's a couple of guys in my house that attend regularly. I know as soon as the schedule works out at work a little bit better, there's a couple people I work with that's going to come.
Yeah, man.
One of my brothers from rehab, man, he finally made the time this Sunday to come attend.
Nice.
Mark Sturgill, I love you.
Yeah. Shout out to Mark.
Definitely, and he's actually a good. I'll talk about him a little bit here in a minute because that man never gave up on me.
Yeah, man.
And it's just the sense of belonging.
Mm-hmm.
Like, we're all there for the same thing.
Yeah, man.
There's no judgment, and
Mm-hmm.
I've gotten to know a lot of the people in the church, and I've obviously gotten heavily involved. Any chance I get, I'm here.
For sure.
You know?
Mike is a pillar. I appreciate you, bro. There's so much you do now. You've jumped fully in, and that's a powerful, beautiful thing. So you've been so. How long has it been now? You've been sober?
So today is 8 months.
Really, today?
Today is 8 months.
Stop playing. Literally today, bro?
Today is 8 months.
That's amazing. Shout out to Mike. I'm going to throw the clapping track in the background. Hey, that's amazing, bro. Congratulations.
And, I didn't even know it. I use this app on my phone called Sober Time. And it counts down everything, breaths, heartbeats, everything. And I just checked it earlier on.
Nice.
And my little milestone popped up, 8 months. And I'm like, man, what a coincidence, because tomorrow is my birthday, I'll be 38 tomorrow, and it's
nice.
Man, 8 months, and then my birthday's tomorrow. It's like, that's a birthday present to myself.
Yeah.
That, man.
Every year we're alive another year, right?
Man,
it's a gift.
Every day is a gift, man. It's a lot of people lose sight of that. Like, we're not promised tomorrow.
Mm-hmm.
And in rehab, anytime somebody get that coin saying that they're going home, the only things I would have for encouragement is don't focus on tomorrow, because tomorrow's not promised. Focus on today. Focus on 5 minutes from now, 2 minutes from now, baby steps, because not every day is going to be sunshine and rainbows.
For sure.
And I got to remember that myself, another person in our church, she said something to me that I've had to use it a couple of times since Sunday. She's like, man, whenever you're just having that aggravating day, she was like, pull the stopwatch out on your phone. Just watch it. Just to make it past a minute. Yeah. And
that's interesting.
And man, it helped.
Yeah.
A lot of things have helped.
That's a good, you bring up a good point, because I think a lot of people, they think whether, again, if you don't even have this story and this history of struggling with some of these battles, like, as you come to Jesus, I wish people were told when they first come to the Lord, when they first become a Christian, hey, bro, there's going to be some days that suck, bro.
Oh, yeah.
You're going to want to give up. You're going to feel like God's a million miles away, and just don't freak out, bro. That's part of it. And I wish if somebody would have told me that. Now, granted, I got saved in prison, so I already knew that. You give your life to the Lord in solitary. You already know the days are going to suck sometimes.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, I think we should tell people, like, hey, man, like, every day is not the mountaintop. It's not biblical. It's not, and there's people out there with this theology that, man, the whole point that Jesus died, was buried, and rose from the grave was so you could live your best life. You could get the car that you want. You could never struggle. You're never going to get sick. You're never going to go through hardship. Like, that is not the Bible, homie. Like,
no.
Like, you're still going to have every human experience that other people have. You just ain't going to walk through it alone, man. And that's the power of it, right? That even if you find yourself hanging on a proverbial cross, it's saying, my God, why have you forsaken me? Like, he's still there. You know what I mean? If you find yourself, feeling full of power and joy, and you have a great day, he's there. He's in all of that, bro.
It kind of takes me back to something, when I was over here helping you out, trying to get everything together, this conversation we had about, my God, why have you forsaken me?
Mm-hmm.
And, we were talking about how people believe God has forsaken them. And something you said, man, it really struck home. It was like, sometimes God does forsake us. But it's not completely.
He steps back.
He steps back because we need to learn.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
and it comes as a parent as well. You know, when you have kids, sometimes you just gotta step back.
There's discipline. There's punishment. There's times where the only way you can learn is to cry it out.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
And you know, it's kind of funny because I think it was a couple of days after that, one of the first times I really had a real deep heart to heart with my mom. You know, she said it to me. She was like, you know, I never gave up on you, not once, but I had to step back and let you live.
That's what I mean by it.
And she's like, you know, I prayed every night. And it brought a tear to my eye because my mom was like, you know, she's like, I prayed every night.
Yeah.
That God would just come into your life.
Yeah.
You know, she's like,
and he answered the prayers.
He did.
You just had to go through some stuff.
And she was like, you know, she was like, at one point, she was like, I'm asking God, like, come on, where's my sign? You know, where's my son? Like, she hadn't heard from me in a while, you know. And the next thing she knows, boom, I'm in rehab.
Yeah.
Now I'm in a sober living. And, you know, my mom doesn't go to church, right, but she does believe in God, you know. And my grandmother, you know, she believed in God. And I remember telling my mom at one point that there's no God. Like, you can't tell me that there's a God or else I wouldn't be going through this. And my mom never missed a beat. And
you know what I find interesting about that is, and everybody has done that, if God was real, then why would this be happening? I was thinking about this. I think this is interesting. This may be a sermon at some point. But God always gets blamed for the bad. Have you ever heard somebody blame the devil for the good in their life?
Nope.
I find that very intriguing.
I do too. You know, now that you say that, like that's gonna be on my mind.
Let that roll around. Those of you listening, I'm gonna disrupt your theology. You know what I mean?
And you know,
but seriously, you know what I mean?
And it's true. Like, we blame every shortcoming on God. Like,
so if he's responsible for the bad, then who's responsible for the good? Because if you're not going to give him credit for both, then you're
and you know,
just a thought. We can move on that.
I
haven't followed that whole thought through. We'll maybe I'll have a sermon on that. But as we wrap up, man, we're running out of time. I just want to be respectful of your time and people's attention spans. Shout out to those of you that are still with us. I love your story, bro. I love your journey. When you think about the next, couple years, what are some of your goals? Where do you see yourself, moving? What's God doing in your heart and in your life?
Well, right now, my main goal, and it's going to be my main goal for the rest of my life, is to continue to be sober and continue building my faith. That's my lifetime goal, because staying sober is a battle every day, and it's going to be for the rest of my life.
For sure.
And having people like you, and, shout out to my girlfriend, Jessica. I brought her to church.
Shout out to Jess. Appreciate you.
I brought her to church. She's dove into church with us,
man.
And she's out, she's there for me. Like, sometimes she doesn't always know what to say.
Yeah. But just being there.
But just being there. And, sometimes, she's quite younger than me, but at the same time, I got to teach her too that sometimes it just takes a hug, or something like that, and a close goal right now is, I believe I said something to you about a week ago or something, I'd been thinking about it for a while, and I'm ready to get baptized, and
let's go.
I'm pretty sure that shocked my mom. Like,
I'm gonna hold you down. No, I'm just playing. I'm gonna hold you down for 3 minutes.
And my mom, she's like, You're doing what now?
I love it, bro. I love it.
And she's waiting on the date for when it's going to happen. My aunt.
We'll schedule that soon.
Honestly,
that's amazing, bro.
Something I want to try to. I think I've found my calling, and I'm slowly working into it. To see. But if this is my calling, then that's where I want to be. I love giving hope back to people that lost it like I did.
For sure.
the only way to continue to receive what you get is to give it away.
Yeah, man.
You know, and that's all I really want to do. You know, I finally found, you know, God again. You know, and I'm discovering His love for all of us again.
Yeah.
And man, I enjoy trying to give that to people, you know, telling them about it. You know, obviously I can't hold them down and throw a Bible in front of them.
Sure.
But, you know.
But people are watching your life, homie.
Oh, yeah.
They're watching and they see, and it's undeniable what the Lord's doing in your life. So, you know, as we wrap up this episode, if there's anything you could say to somebody that's listening to this, that's battling addiction, it may not even be drugs. You might be addicted to something else. You might eat too much food. You might be looking at porn. You know what I mean? You might be wrapped up in adultery and fornication, or addicted to something else. You might be addicted to selfishness and greed or materialism. And you're just, you don't want to live that way. There's this person that you want to be and the person that you are, and you can't seem to close that gap, and you feel hopeless and you want to get free. What would you say to that person?
Don't be afraid to ask for help. You know, I think that's what really, that was the hardest part for me, was going, okay, I need help, you know, and don't think for 1 second that you're alone, that, you know, that you're the only one suffering. You know, God loves you, you know.
Yeah.
You know, when at your moment of need, I promise you, God is there.
Yeah.
You know, it's going to be hard. You know, if you're in addiction, active addiction, you know, you're probably listening to this going, yeah, well, not everybody can do it. No, everybody can do it. Mm-hmm. You just got to put your pride aside. Set your pride aside. You know, ask for help. Yeah. Get help. You know, and if you are in addiction because you've relapsed, man, my biggest words of encouragement is, it's not the fall that matters.
Yeah.
It's how you pick yourself up and recover.
For sure.
You know, I'm going to respect somebody a lot more that goes, man, I messed up. Mm-hmm. What do I do from here? You know, I'm going to respect that, and I'm going to do anything I can, anything in my power to help you get back up. Why? Because somebody did it for me.
For sure.
You know?
Well, I think what you said is the key, is like, you are not the only one. And like, that's one of the things, again, we're trying to break that stereotype that as people even come into a church environment, you know, if you're struggling with this deep, dark thing, and again, it doesn't have to be the prison stuff or the addiction. It could be something entirely different. You're struggling with something. The myth and the lie is that somebody in your row is not. Like, let me tell you something, homeboy, homegirl. It's not true. If we could lay everybody's skeletons out in every church and put them up on the projector or the LED wall, like, I think you would feel way more comfortable. Can I tell you something? You're not that unique. Your sin is not that unique. We are all in need of a Savior, and we're in need of the Spirit to live this thing out. So you're not alone. You are not alone. And so, my brother, my sister, may you go forth from this episode of the Fringe podcast knowing that if there's hope for Mike, if there's hope for me, if we can find our way out of the sewer, then maybe you can find your way out. Grace and peace. We will talk to you soon. Have a wonderful, wonderful week. We'll see you next week.
Jesus, Jesus, can you save us from governments and love of power that enslaves us? Jesus, Jesus, can you save us from the love of money, greed that sedates us? Jesus, Jesus, can you save us from placing faith in chariots and military guards? Jesus, Jesus, can you save us from the towers of Babylon that still plague us? Waking from the slumber, see our freedom's made of slaves. Only then the gate will open, find the focus to escape all the hopeless, see the blame, blood of Cain is in our veins, dreams filled with sweatshots.